This video mentions death, injuries, and accidents. If you know that such topics distress you, please do not watch this video. On December 1st in 1984, a plane was crashed in the California desert. There were no casualties because the plane carried no people. The plane was controlled remotely and was crashed on purpose in an experiment known as the Controlled Impact Demonstration. So, an empty plane that was meant to crash in the desert crashed in the desert. How do we write about this event? This video is about the news value of impact. The video first explains what is impact as a news value. The video then discusses the three kinds of impact often covered in news about accidents. Finally, the video shows how public relations writers use news values when communicating about products offered by their companies. Back to the controlled impact demonstration in the desert. How do we tell this news? Let's first try to guide our writing with the 5 W's and an H, meaning that we will start the news by stating who did what, where, and when. Информационное агентство ТАСС сообщает. I apologize, I was born in the Soviet Union. Just give me a second. I'm back in the USSR. Back in the US, back in the US. A plane was purposely crashed in the Mojave Desert on Saturday. Wait, what? We could do better than this. Well, we are doing well if the goal is to follow the 5 W's and an H in the lead. Who? Well, what in this case? A plane. Did what? Was crashed. How was it crashed? Purposely. Where was it purposely crashed? In the Mojave Desert. When did this happen? December 1st in 1984 was a Saturday. But yes, we can do better than this. To make the lead more informative, we will rely on news values. News values are qualities of events that make people want to learn more about these events. So what makes the crash in the desert interesting for the audience? A distinguished journalism professor, Dr. Pamela Shoemaker, argued that people pay attention to news because they are genetically wired to monitor their environment for danger. Such danger could be an unfriendly neighboring tribe or a predatory animal. Whatever it was, there was always something dangerous lurking behind the trees, and the surroundings were constantly monitored by at least one member of the community to keep everyone safe. Most of us now live in conditions where predators are not a danger anymore, but our evolution-induced habit of monitoring our environment manifests itself in monitoring the news. Is my government planning something that will make my life harder? Is the economy doing all right? Basically, people are monitoring the news to see if there is anything that will affect them. So, how can the crash in the desert affect our audience? What can we say to an audience member who is asking, "What's in this news for me?" Let's look at why the plane was crashed in the first place. When an airplane crashes, people who survived the impact can be in danger of dying in a fire because planes carry fuel which can catch fire. Simulated impact tests, the ones where no flying planes were actually crashed, were suggesting that those post-crash fires can be prevented by adding an anti-misting chemical to the fuel. It wasn't practical to add the chemical to aviation fuel just in case it works. We needed to be more certain in the initial results, and a real-life test was needed. To carry out that real-life test, as well as several other experiments, the Federal Aviation Administration in the United States partnered with space agency NASA and several other agencies. They spent 4 years planning the controlled impact demonstration. Finally, on December 1st in 1984, the experiment was carried out. Not everything went according to plan. The fuselage of the plane was damaged, and this led to an unplanned fire inside the cabin. In the end, it was concluded that the anti-misting additive was not efficient enough in all circumstances. So, what would the audience want to know here? Well, in short, there was an additive that potentially could prevent airplane fuel from catching fire, which could have increased the chances of survival. That could have been good news. The additive was tested in a complicated experiment, and it looks like it doesn't really work well, so not so good news. And this is what the audience would want to know. The news about the anti-misting additive is not encouraging, and an airplane crash still has a risk of fire associated with it. An anti-misting additive to the aviation fuel likely is not efficient enough to prevent fires in all airplane crashes. Such conclusion is one of the outcomes of a complicated experiment in which a remotely controlled Boeing 720 was crashed in the Mojave Desert on Saturday. Let's have a look at this lead. The news about the where and when are now in the second sentence. The first sentence focuses on the outcome of the experiment, and the outcome in this case is not good news for the anti-misting additive. Should it be otherwise, the lead would have had a bit more of a positive feel to it, and it still would be communicating the news value of impact in that case. Sadly, news about accidents often involves reporting about real people as passengers. So, when writing about an accident, we first report whether anyone has died. We then report how many people were injured and how serious those injuries were. Only after that, we report if there was any damage caused to property. We report the loss of life first, even if the number of fatalities is significantly lower than the number of people who were injured. If there were no fatalities in the accident, we start the lead by reporting the number of people injured. But in general, when writing a lead about an accident, we communicate the impact by stating the number of people who were killed and the number of people who were injured. If we mention the condition of the vehicle they were in, we do so somewhat late in the story, because people are more important than machines. Let's have a look at an example. We are in the state of New Jersey in the United States, and we are back in time on May 6 in 1937. On that day, a German passenger airship at.129 Hindenburg caught fire during an attempt to dock at the Naval Air Station Lakehurst. The Hindenburg was destroyed in a matter of about 32 seconds. It was later determined that the fire was likely due to a spark that ignited leaking hydrogen, a gas the Hindenburg used for floating in the air. In total, there were 97 passengers and crew members on board. 35 of them died in the crash or after the crash while being treated in hospital. There was one casualty among the people on the ground. It was a member of the civilian landing party, Alan Hageman. 62 people survived, but many of them were seriously injured. Before we write a lead and a few sentences in the body of the news story about this accident, let's make a couple of assumptions. Please note that our assumptions almost certainly will not reflect the reality in which journalists were working back in 1937. But we need to agree on what we know and don't know at the moment of writing this story. So first, let's assume that at the time of writing, we know how many people were on board, 97 people. Second, let's assume that at the time of writing, we know the first news about the death count. We know that 10 passengers and 16 members of the crew died in this accident at the time when it happened. This means that at the time of writing, we know about the total of 26 deaths among those on board. Third, let's assume that we already know that one person on the ground, Alan Hageman, has died. This brings the total number of fatalities to 27 people. Fourth, let's assume we know that the majority of the 71 survivors were severely injured and had to be taken to hospital. We don't know exactly how many survivors were injured. Let's also assume that we don't know how many survivors died in hospital care. Finally, we don't know the likely cause of the fire yet. We don't know that the fire was caused probably by a spark that ignited leaking hydrogen gas. All we know is that the fire started while the Hindenburg was attempting to dock with its mooring mast. One last thing, we are writing this from Manchester Township in New Jersey. So how do we approach this story? We will start by communicating the loss of life and damage to health. We will communicate the news value of impact in the shape of who did what part of the 5 W's and an H. Manchester, New Jersey. 27 people died and many more were injured after a fire broke on German passenger airship Hindenburg while it was attempting to dock at Naval Air Station Lakehurst in New Jersey on Thursday evening. Please note that we've communicated the loss of life and the loss of health at the beginning. The news value of impact was communicated as who did what part of the 5 W's and an H. 27 people died and many more were injured. We also included the how the accident happened, after a fire broke on German passenger airship Hindenburg while it was attempting to dock. Finally, we stated the where, Naval Air Station Lakehurst in New Jersey, and the when, on Thursday evening. In the second sentence, we will write what we know about the why the fire started. More precisely, we will write that we don't know why. We will also try to explain why there were so many casualties. The cause of fire was not immediately known. When the first visible flames were spotted at approximately 7:25 p.m., the airship was floating at about 180 feet above the ground. Several eyewitnesses said it took the Hindenburg less than a minute to crash to the ground after the first signs of fire. Now, we've stated that we don't know why the accident happened and painted a picture of how it happened. We will now move back to providing the details that communicate the news value of impact. Those details will report the total number of people who were on board. We will also explain how many people among them were there as a part of their job. Finally, we will detail what we know about the survivors. Among those killed in the accident were 16 crew members, 10 passengers, and 1 civilian ground crew member. The German Zeppelin airline company that operated the flight from Frankfurt in Germany had 36 passengers and 61 crew members on board when the airship left for the United States on Monday. Many of the 71 survivors are believed to have suffered serious injuries. At some point of the story, to address the loss of property part of the news value of impact, we will mention that the airship was destroyed beyond repair. The airship was destroyed beyond repair. We will probably continue the story with what is known about how experienced was its commander, Captain Max Bruce, and for how long the Hindenburg had been in commercial service. The Hindenburg's commander, Captain Max Bruce, who received several burns in the accident, is reported to have extensive experience of transatlantic flights. This was his first flight as the commanding captain of the Hindenburg. The Hindenburg was in commercial service since March 1936. Car accidents are among the most common events that carry the news value of impact. We inform people about such accidents because many of us travel by road to get somewhere almost every day. I will place several leads on the screen. Please identify what kind of impact is communicated here: loss of life, damage to health, or damage to property. 2 people were killed and 3 others were injured in a car accident in Rasselheimer on Tuesday. 17 people were injured in a 69 vehicle pileup caused by fog on the road between Abu Dhabi and Al Ain on Sunday morning. 2 cars sustained minor damage in an accident on Sheikh Zayed Road on Saturday afternoon. The last example probably won't make it to the news as a lead of a news story of its own because the effects of this accident are not significant enough for a general audience. Rather, this incident will probably be a part of a news story summarizing all the accidents that happened in the city over the weekend. Public relations writers also use the news value of impact when they write about products and services. The news value of impact is often communicated as an effect the product is meant to help achieve when it is used. For example, a beard oil by Gucci will help to create a smooth feel and appearance. In another example, home furnishing company Aura conveyed the news value of impact by explaining that all profits from sales of its new designer tableware collection will go to Insan, a Saudi Arabian charity dedicated to the care of orphans. And this brings us to the end of this video. In this video, we learned that the news value of impact is present in events that have some sort of an effect on the lives of people. For example, the controlled impact demonstration back in 1984 resulted in disappointing news that an anti-misting additive cannot stop fires in all airplane crashes. This news event had an impact on the safety of people who travel by air. When writing about accidents, we communicate the news value of impact by describing the loss of life first, then loss of health, and finally, loss of property. Brands communicate impact when they describe the kind of positive effect their product will have on the customer. Some businesses fulfill their corporate social responsibility by directing a part of sales profit to charity. In such cases, they promote their actions by using the language that communicates the positive impact on the lives of people in need. This video was created by me, Yulia Medvedeva. Footage primarily came from American Space Agency NASA and from archive.org and Pixabay websites. Music featured in this video is Travelers by Alicia David. Thank you for watching.